All right, these parts of the reassembly in detail, how to assemble that shaft setup over there, right? The shift shafts and linkages. I did not take any of this apart, except for this fork and this fork, because I wanted to clean, and I used some blue thread locking compound and a wrench, or a ratcheting wrench rather, to tighten up both of those forks. I have already driven the transmission case front oil seal into its housing. I did that yesterday. We oiled the seal. Note the depth that they desire the seal to be placed, driven. Since we're reassembling the transmission, instead of getting a new unit, the two snap rings are already in place. The number 1 oil receiver pipe, I will give you a part number for that, because this is the old one that I broke. This is the new one. There's only one in the country, apparently. Looks like I get to clean it out, because there's some shit in it. That is the part number. So we'll go ahead and put that off to the side. We'll install this, and then I'll show you its location in the transmission. Visible here is the oil receiver pipe. This little hole pokes up, and then this index along with this guy into this little notch and the respective notches. I don't think that there's any other way that it can go, and I put some ATF on it because I like having things lubed. Helps stuff to stay in place. Bonk. And as you can see, this dowel is facing up. Those two index with their holes, and then this aligns with the notch. The next thing that we're going to do is install the main shaft first, then the counter shaft, and then I believe we can fit the shift forks and shafts around it, and then we'll tie it all together, but I'm not entirely sure, so I'll let you know how it goes. Here's the other stuff, and then we get to the mega wrench. Main shaft, counter shaft, shift forks, neutral, neutral. I think that's reverse. Neutral, and neutral. Okay, I'll get this flipped over and show you the arrangement from the back. I had this shift fork flipped over. This is how it's actually supposed to be, with this round protrusion facing the front, and the sort of dip up, and this longer shoulder here facing the back of the transmission. All right, so this is the view of the shift forks on the main and counter shafts. As you can see, everything's still in neutral. This is how everything is supposed to be orientated, at least as best as I can tell. Everything's slipped together more or less pretty well. I don't remember what, oh, that's the reverse idler shaft hole, never mind. Yeah. All right, so the shift forks, shafts, counter shaft, and main shaft are now installed with their snap rings into the transmission. The way that I did this was by placing the counter shaft in the shift forks that receive it, and then sliding the main shaft in and working this cast iron shift fork back and forth till it slid over this slider. And then the other aluminum, or no, it was this slider in the back, and then the aluminum shift fork slid in pretty easily to that one. You'll want a chunk of rope. Wrap the shift shaft and fork assembly, counter and main shaft rather, tightly together and tie them off. And I did 3 wraps. Then place them with the transmission this side facing down into the bell housing. I took a pair of snap ring pliers like so, and by jiggling this back and forth was able to, well, I had the screw on the other setting but expanded instead of goes together, but I was able to get the snap ring to expand apart, and it's now in the groove of the bearing there. You can see also that these are roughly aligned, not perfectly. They did seat on their dowels earlier, but this one is a bit more of an issue. The way that I dealt with this was by taking a block of 2x4 and a block of 1x4, stacking them underneath of the shift shafts and the end of the main shaft. This roughly equals the height of the end of the counter shaft. I then flipped this sucker upright with this end of the bell housing facing upright, and by jiggling the bell housing and then the counter shaft, was able to get the snap ring secured into place. That brings us up to speed where we are now. So you can see both of the grooves align with the holes here and here. This guy does not turn because I think it's in 2 gears, but we're going to go ahead and flip this back upright and secure the shifter linkages and put the transmission into neutral. Okay, I stand corrected. These 2 bearings are in, the oil receiver is in, the transmission shafts are in the front case or the bell housing. After I lubed up the front seal as well. This part, 27mm. We need to install the plug into the case. And to do that, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need the plug, and either the most massive hexagon wrench you've ever seen, 27mm, or a grade 10 bolt, or maybe this is grade 8. As you can see, it's an SAE bolt, so it doesn't fit exactly perfectly, but it fits pretty darn snug. We welded a nut to it. I'm going to use some blue thread locker after I clean the threads with a solvent to secure this into place, and then we are going to go ahead and install it and probably just rattle it in with the impact gun. If you want to torque yours down, the spec, 29 pounds, so not terribly hard, but you would have to figure out a way to fixture this bell housing. Maybe put a pry bar in here or a pry bar through here or something like that to leverage against it while you tighten. All right, this guy's torqued in with my many extensions. It's my nice torque wrench. Now I think we're good to flip it up on its front. Oh, boy, you can actually see this pretty well. Better than I can. This phone picks up light pretty well. This is the sleeve that I purchased that fits over the input shaft quill tube where the throwout bearing rides. This is retained with 4 Allen screws, and its purpose is to provide a smooth and flat surface for the throwout bearing right there to ride on. Otherwise, there's a good degree of throwout bearing chatter during normal operation. Next, step 15, install the reverse idler gear with its roller bearing, gear, and shaft. Note the orientation of the gear Note this line that traces up as well. This drops through the top of the gear, along with the roller bearing. So the roller bearing goes in first, and then the reverse idler shaft drops in immediately afterwards. Note these two hints. Okay, so I slipped the gear in first, and it has to go with this facing up. Then I installed the roller bearing. And note that all of this has been coated in our lubricant. I also lubricated the end of the shaft. Should pop into place. Not too much of an issue. Huh. There she goes. Now, I think we can adjust this as needed. You will want this tapped hole to be facing out between these two holes at about 15 degrees there. And that's so that is so that way the armature that actuates this can thread into the reverse idler, if I'm not mistaken. Next, we're going to install the backup light switch. I'm using an SAE socket for this. I don't know what size. 1 1/16 it looks like. I'm going to put some thread lock on this guy as well. Cleaned it with brake clean. Tightened to 33 pounds, which is what I have torque wrench set to. Next, we're going to install the shift and select lever cam. They want us to use a new E-ring. That's not going to happen. But as you can see, the E-ring has some room to move, and it will sit securely against this O-ring, or this circular boss within this cam. Note that this threaded hole in the bottom is also present in the bottom of the illustration, and that this boss faces with the non-chamfered or rounded side towards the E-clip, and the rounded side facing down in this orientation. You can slide this off and flip it the other way. It's not hard, so that's how it's supposed to go. All right, oh good, I got oil on something else, lovely. Install the lock ball pin and spring onto the shift and shift select lever. So that's this guy, right? And that's this. So there's that thicker spring, the green one. The assembly looks similar to this, but the spring's about twice as wide, a little thicker. And then there's the roller. Oh, right there. The way that I did this was I had this turn 90 degrees. I got it to slide into place, and then I twisted it like this with bare needle nose pliers. Now I'm going to take this small 10mm threaded cap screw and secure this in. And there is one end of the hole that has sort of a divot or a chamfer, or a countersink rather. Not sure why. And then the other side doesn't, so I'm going to go into the countersunk side. I think that's how it's supposed to work. Right, because when it's sitting in the transmission, those detents are going to face that way. I'm pretty sure that's how this goes on. But I'm going to go take a look at how it came apart. I stand corrected. These detents have to face this direction towards this portion of the shift shaft lever thing. I don't know what the torque spec for the little bolt is on the back side. I just got her glued in tight with this guy, and I used a blue thread locker. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I've never had one go anywhere on me. Oh, there you go. 25 pounds. And I think we're good to drop this guy in. It should sit like so, in the transmission. Next, step F, install the 4 bolts into the interlock bracket. 1, 2, 3, and 4, torque to 15 pounds. If I remember correctly, out of the parts pile, these are the 4 bolts. Well, there's no nuts associated with them, so they're technically threaded cap screws, but I'm not a cunt. I'm gonna wash them in brake clean to get the kerosene off, but first I'm gonna thread them in just to make sure they're the correct length and pitch. Make sure that when you're doing this, there's no gap between the machine surface of the bell housing and the interlock plate. And make sure that it's not cockeyed over here. Maybe take a plastic hammer and make sure this is seated all the way. Okay, so I've gone ahead and taken some brake clean and cleaned up this mating surface, and then I took the brass bristle brush and I cleaned up this mating surface. I'm going to use some of the assembly goo to lube up this hole in this shaft here, because I don't want the ATF dripping down on the mating surface when I'm trying to put some sealant on it. And as you can see, I've also cleaned up this one pretty well. These 3 holes with this boss for the dowel pin fit onto the bottom of the transmission, so that's where that's going to go. And then this hole aligns with this threaded hole on the reverse idler shaft, which is where this bolt with the cone tip is going to go in just a minute. Okay, so the next step is going to be to install that oil receiver pipe, and I believe that goes right down here. I think I brake cleaned this off yesterday, and those 2 holes kind of line up right there like that. And I'm going to put some of that green assembly tack on there, as well as shove some of that in here. And then I'll show you kind of putting it on. Okay, so this hole has been lubed up, and then this oil receiver pipe is installed. It's old, so the plastic is a little bit shrunk on this dowel pin, or the boss rather. It's got the 2 tabs that kind of squeeze together. They're supposed to go down in there. So that's that guy, that oil receiver pipe. I'm going to leave the drain plug out until I get everything together, in case I need to like wash anything out or whatever, I don't know. Next, we're going to put some seal pack and some RTV on the, I'm probably going to put it on the bell housing side, on that mating surface right there, and then drop the case half on top of it. Yeah, assemble it in 10 minutes. Transmission case, 11 bolts. So yeah, what I'm going to do is drop it on, and then I'll deck with the bolts here. But before I do any of the bolting, I'm probably going to install this bolt just loosely, the reverse idler gear, just to make sure everything's like lined up, because I don't want to get it all together and then realize that I can't get my bolt in. I mean, I'm sure I could stick the pick down in there and move it, but like, I don't know, ounce of prevention, pound of cure. And then we'll move on to the oil separator and the other bearings and stuff. Okay, so this is the caulk gun that I got off the side of the road last winter, and I'm just going to use it to run a bead around the inside and then again around the outside of these holes, and just a thin bead. Don't need a lot, because if you put a lot in, it's just going to get smudged into the transmission. There's no pumps in here, so it's not like a huge issue, but like in an automatic, you can plug pumps, you can plug filters, small orifices, so be kind of sparing with it. Be sure to get all the way around everything, but like, just the more important thing is making sure you got a clean surface, because a little bit goes a long way. like a 1/16 to 1/8 bead of this stuff will be sufficient. And then, yeah, I'll show you once everything's kind of siliconed up. I just set this guy on there. I'm gonna go all the way around the perimeter and make sure that the case is installed correctly and is seated. And then I'm gonna take a look and make sure that, well, get some of the shmoo off of there. And then I also took a pick and went into this hole and made sure that I can feel the threads. Yeah, you can hear that. The threads in there scraping. So, oh yeah, and I'm using the Permatex Right stuff. You can't see it, but that's okay. And I might try to seal it up with a cap from one of those gear oils or something. I don't know. Keep the air out of it. But anyhow, so I'll probably try to like clamp it down or something and then put the transmission on its, like, on the bottom and support the back with wood and then install the bolts. But the more important thing is it's seated now most of the way. There's a little crack, but probably won't cause any issues. Oh yeah, I want to make sure that part of the oil dam is also on, that little nipple right there. Cool. And then once this is dried, I might pour a little ATF and like put some grease up and down this guy, just because, like, well, the training's gonna be full of oil. I don't think it really matters, but yeah, make sure too that the little detent thing, or little arm of the shift assembly, stays within these 4 shift shaft indices or whatever they're called, and then that this guy stays mounted on the reverse idler. And so long as that's it, everything should be kosher. Or no, this is the top of the transmission. This is the bottom, because that's where the drain plug is. Man, I've been backwards this whole freaking time. That's awesome. Well, it's hard to be an intellectual. Okay, I'll show you putting those 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think no? 11 bolts. We'll get her figured out. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these longer bolts, 3.15 inch, I think it said. Yeah, 3.15, and then we got the 1.57 inch should be 3 on the bottom, and then 1, 2, 3 up top. So 3 and 6 and 5 is 11, and then we got just some extra ones. Okay, so all 11 bolts have been torqued down to 30 pounds, I think was the spec. Now we're going to torque down the reverse idler bolts to 21 pounds. We're supposed to get a new gasket for it, so I might see if I have a new crush washer. But let's thread it out, have a looky at it. I mean, it looks usable to me, so that one's up to you. 25-cent washer. Yeah, we'll see if I have any kicking around down in here. I'm gonna reuse this washer. If you take one of these and you heat it up with propane torch and then you quench it in water, I think it like anneals them, and then you can reuse them. I'm just gonna put it back in and torque it down. And so long as it isn't exactly where it was earlier, you can see it's kind of almost an eccentric off the center of the hole, then it should be fine and it'll seal. And if we have any issues, we can always pop it out and go get a different washer, because it's pretty easy to get to right there. So yeah, might have to take the clutch out, or the slave cylinder assembly, or cover off, but I think I'll be able to get to it. So okay, so now we're going to well, we already installed the counter gear radial ball bearing. That was the one I had in the freezer. So now I'm going to install the lock plate. Say gear oil. Yeah, he's trying to loop. Big whoop. Anyhow, so I'm just thinking this through. 8.3 pounds again. I'm just going to put some Loctite on it, and then we'll get to. Well, I've already installed these races. I think I showed you doing that earlier. And then we'll go ahead and install that packing. But first, this is the lock plate. Sorry, I was looking at it through my camera on my phone. Well, I don't think it matters which way it goes in. I think it's flat either way, and it looks like this was the side that was facing down, so that's the side that we're going to put facing down as well. Oh, there's a red mite that's crawling on the tranny. That's fun. Yeah, Loctite it, and then use a long extension and tighten her down. I think the seal packing that they're talking about is this chunk of rubber, and I put it on. This little slit right here aligns with a hole underneath right there. You can see because there's a little nub that kind of sticks down into it, and then these two I think just kind of hold up against here. But I'm gonna go take a look at the instructions and see what they say. I think there's a mosquito in the shop, and I'm not McLoving that. Yeah, there's that ball bearing with the thing that we just installed right there. So yeah, that seal packing goes just like that. Next, we're going to clean and install the longer plastic receiver pipe for oil, which it looks like goes in right there. Yep. Be careful with this guy. She's probably kind of brittle and old. Yeah, it'll go in like that once we've cleaned it off. It's still got a bunch of kerosene on it, so. Okay, so now it says to install the transmission filler plugs. I guess there are 2 filler plugs. And then we'll install the rear case half after we have cleaned this surface again, just to get any oil and schmoo off of there that might have collected. This guy will, or this end of this housing corresponds with these 2 holes. This is the bottom, that's the drain plug that we've left out. This, I think, is one of the filler plugs that they're talking about, because on the inside of the tranny case, it doesn't go to anything in here, so that, I'm probably also going to put just a little bit of that green assembly goo in here on each one of these, as well as for the shift rail, just to keep stuff from moving around too much and kind of tack it in place. And then we'll have to install the output shaft. It'd be funny if I forgot the output shaft and got it all together and was like, oh, well. So we'll need to do that here momentarily as well. But I think, yeah, this filler plug and then this guy, this is the main filler plug for the transmission. It would be funny to fill the transmission all the way up to here. I think you might blow a few seals if you did that. But yeah, the tranny level is only supposed to be to right here. I honestly wouldn't mind putting an external cooler on this transmission with, like, this is the inlet, and then this guy is the outlet, and then putting like a little inline pump or something, and then an auxiliary cooler on it, especially if you do any towing. It'd just be a good idea. But, you know, idea for a different day. I don't do a lot of towing, but it's still good to cool. I mean, that's why they got all these fins on the outside, strengthening and heat dissipation. But maybe I could get like a radiator from an automatic and then put bungs in it and then have it like circulate to those fittings in the automatic transmission style radiator, because, you know, they got that tank on the side that, like, is supposed to accept oil, so from the automatic. So I mean, look, gear oil's basically tranny fluid, right? ATF. All right, that's been packed with some goo. Those three have been packed, and then that hole up there has been packed. This guy where the shifter sits, with some of the assembly goo. I also cleaned this off with a wire brush, and then I'm going to take a wire brush to this surface. I'm gonna put a couple rags and stuff here just to prevent stuff from getting dirty. I should have done this before I put all this together, but whatever. Anyhow, and then we'll put a bead of silicone around here and pop this guy on. I'm pretty sure that, so those are the used bearings. These are the new crush sleeve and rear output bearing. So yeah, I'm gonna go deal with those, and then that's for the shifter and the detent plug, and then these bolts, or these brackets rather, go with these bolts that are gonna hold the rear case onto the middle case, and that is pictured over here where these clamps, their brackets go. Also 30 foot-pounds for all of those remaining bolts to be put on. So I'll get her cleaned up, get some parts dealt with here, and I'll show you installing this rear case. Oh yeah, and the output shaft is now on. Its synchronizer interlocks with this slider, and then there's 3 tabs on it. It's a single piece, and then so you drop that in first, align it, and then you can just slide this gear on. And yeah, it's full of ATF, so everything's good there. And then this guy indexes with this roller bearing back here, so we don't need to worry about that. And I think just before we get everything together, we're going to go ahead and flip the tranny around and make sure that everything's still in neutral, just so that way we don't have to like fish and reach or have to take this back off. All right, so as you can see, I have some silicone beaded around the perimeter of the middle case, and I've gone around each one of the holes, just kind of being OCD. Let's see if I can't. There it goes. Now, as I was installing this, I made sure to watch this shaft come up through the hole. There's some fuzzies. The oil guard that goes right here inside of the transmission got hung up right here, so I had to kind of push that in. Be very gentle with all this stuff. You don't want to break that oil guard. I'm now going to take a mallet and smack around the top. Just make sure all the dowels are seated. Everything's kosher, going together. Cool. These bolts are what's going to hold everything together. They're the same length. These are for the shifter, which will go in after we get stuff bolts together. We will need these brackets. And then this guy will be what retains that rear bearing. And that's going to be kind of a pain getting that guy all torqued together. I might need a second set of hands for that, because we got to use that clutch welded tool thing to hold the input shaft while it's in gear. I think in like 5th is what they said. Yeah, it's 5th, to torque that nut down to whatever to get that crush sleeve in the middle to preload the 2 bearings. It's kind of a silly design, but whatever. I might have to install that shifter thing here first. Let me go look. Sorry, time is of the essence here, but as you can see, there's a rib on the bottom right here that corresponds with this rib on the transmission. You got to install, well, I'm installing this shifter on here before I get in there because I don't see how I'm going to be able to get that into place after this is assembled. So go ahead and put this on once this guy slips through this case housing, and then go ahead and see. Okay, so I've lubed up the smaller detent and spring, and this is the hole. I flipped the tranny around. There's the shifter. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and put that guy into the hole. I torqued this bolt down to 15 pounds and used my punch, my long drift just there, to make sure that the shifter slides up and down and moves back and forth. I don't know where my shift lever is. I think it might still be in my truck, but I'm going to take it out and put it on outside the truck to make sure I can go into all gears and the tranny turns over fine in all the gears. It doesn't sound weird. But anyhow, I'm going to torque this guy down. I don't remember what this little nut is supposed to, or this little screw is supposed to go to, torque wise. Probably like 10 pounds or something, but I'm going to put some RTV on it, or maybe some blue thread locker. Either one will work. Well, there was something about it installing a T-tent in here. I'm not tripping, am I? Huh, weird. Awesome. Oh, there's like 5 pages dedicated to setting up this nut. That's cool. It's gonna be fun. But yeah, here are the clamps and their orientation. These two correspond to these two, and this one corresponds to this clamp. I will show you that once I figured out where they go on the housing. Okay, this is the top of the transmission shifter. This is the right side with the driver's right side anyways, with this bracket. I think this is the way that this guy goes. That, with this hung down, and this pointed up. It's hung down there, and then something's pointed up there. And then on this side, this guy, or no, this guy is kind of facing out. It looks like this corresponds to that. So this guy should be facing out, which it is. And then this clamp goes out and then jogs up, and it goes out and jogs up here. So I'm going to go ahead and torque this transmission rear case together. Everything to 30 pounds. And hey, that's supposed to go to 18 pounds. I thought it was in here, yeah. So we'll go ahead and do that one to 18 pounds. I already installed it, so maybe we'll do that first since it's got some blue thread lock on it. You'll need some kind of sealant on the threads just to keep any oil from leaking out since there's no crush washer. All right. Oh, it's filming upright or sideways now. Thank you. So I lubed up the crush sleeve here. Doesn't matter which way it goes in. So we're just going to pop that onto the shaft right there. And now we're going to take and lube up the bearing. Suppose I could put my lube further away. Okay. Right onto the shaft. Well, I might have to give this guy a couple taps with a drift to get it on, and then we're going to screw the nut on. And then we got to drill some holes through our clutch tool so we can secure it to the bell housing with some bolts and nuts, and then we can work on torquing this nut. Okay, the instructions say to install and tighten this nut by hand, which I have done. And you can see that it's kind of, now I just turned the transmission. So I think we're supposed to turn this over 15 times with the shift select lever in neutral. we installed spacer number 2 roller bearing, yeah, new nut. And then this, I couldn't get the roller bearing in any further because it's seated against its race. And then you can check to see if you're in neutral. By seeing if the input and output shafts turn at the same time. Yep, we are in neutral. That's just the drag of the transmission and the grease that we've installed. So that's something to watch out for. Because I can put it into gear like that, or pull it out of gear, and then just like you're shaking the shift lever, kind of move it. So we know that we're in neutral, and we can turn the sucker over. I might get a ratchet for this or something and kind of put it over the bench so I have more leverage. And I'm going to use a 2 3/8 socket, and I'm probably going to put a rag over this and then kind of beat this socket on there so that way it doesn't slip, because it's like a 67 mil socket and they want like $80 for it. I'm like, fuck no, I'm not doing that. So we're gonna improvise. Yeah, this is probably it's my nice snap-on ratchet Buddy gave me. Yeah, and we're just gonna put the end of this kind of over the end of the bench here and spin it over. Okay, here's the super special tool I have rigged up. We welded it. I guess you could try something else. I don't know. This was the old clutch. I mean, it was still perfectly fine, and you could probably grind it off and reuse the clutch, but like, I drilled 2 holes. There are 2 that are approximately opposite each other. I just kind of offset the holes a little bit, and then I put bolts that are smaller than the diameter of this hole. Kind of cantilevered it, and I tightened it down. So now the input shaft is fixed, and we can go about tightening up the nut in the back. Not a patented idea, so make your own, I guess.